Hello and welcome to today's IWCS webinar. My name is Michelle Melsop, and I will be your moderator and producer for today's IWCS webinar series event. We have a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please note that as an attendee, you are part of a larger audience. During the presentation, all participants will remain in listen-only mode. And as a reminder, this event is being recorded for rebroadcast. We encourage you to submit written questions using the chat panel on the right of your screen. Hit the send button. Your questions will be addressed, time permitting, at the end of the presentation. Today, we welcome Dr. Bianca Hadetsky, Global Technology Director for the Chemours Company in Delaware, USA. Bianca will be presenting her paper on fluoropolymer sustainability and responsible manufacturing to support cable and connectivity. Dr. Bianca Hadetsky is the Global Technology Director for the Advanced Performance Materials Division of the Chemours Company, LLC. She received her Bachelor's in Science and Chemistry from Millersville University and PhD in Chemistry from the Pennsylvania State University. Welcome, Bianca, to present at today's IWCS webinar series event. Bianca, if you'd like to take control now, you can.
Sure. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for joining today. It looks like we have a pretty good turnout. I hope everybody made it through some of the storms that came through recently, and some holidays and vacation time. So I'm glad you're attending, and if you're not able to join, then I hope you're at least able to access the recording afterwards. Please let me know at the end if you have questions. We can certainly follow up on some conversations afterwards as well. I have a couple of publications we can share that might help with some deeper discussions with some of the components that we may not be able to dive as deep in today as well. So let's talk more about fluoropolymer sustainability, responsible manufacturing for cable and connectivity. This is a follow-up to a presentation and paper that we used in the fall with a few new pieces, but a lot of the same type of content. So moving forward. Here are some examples of fluorochemistries. Really, you can see that fluoropolymers, fluoroproducts are foundational to modern life, enabling every corner of the economy from clean energy to vital defense systems, equipment, life-saving medical devices, even manufacturing semiconductor chips that are used in smartphones, computers, advanced electronics, and more. Whether you're looking at your weekend coming up with transportation from internal combustion engine, hybrid or electric vehicle, air travel, train travel, et cetera, you're going to rely on fluoropolymers and fluorochemistries to get you there safely. So it's really critical for us to understand the value chain, understand the regulatory landscape, and understand how to make sure that everything enabling this technology is going to continue to become more and more sustainable going forward. In fact, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce recently released an economic impact report that examined 7 key sectors where fluorochemistries are absolutely essential: aerospace, data centers, defense, energy, healthcare, transportation, and semicon. Without fluorochemistries, 6.1 million jobs and $1 trillion in GDP that's supported by these sectors in the U.S. would be at risk. So the economic impact and importance of fluorochemistries is massive. As we look at these materials specifically, today we'll talk mostly about fluoropolymers, specifically for the wire and cable space. Just looking at these materials and what they kind of bring to the table and why they're selected. These materials, because of the really strong carbon-fluorine bond, have a unique combination of properties. Everything from non-wetting, low coefficient of friction, fire resistance, resistance to corrosive, harsh chemical environments, excellent electrical properties for insulation, low loss, low decay, low DF, extremely high and low temperatures, mechanical stress crack resistance, flexibility. There are a lot of components that fluoroproducts can bring to the table. One of the things that we see a lot when we work with customers to select new products is that Any one of these might be able to be served with a different material, but when a combination is needed, the fluoropolymers oftentimes are the only solution. So some of the things that we mentioned earlier that are really critical are ultra low loss and high speed data transmission for high frequencies, even at elevated temperatures or at very low temperatures, depending on the kind of ambient conditions and environments they'll be used in. The chemical, thermal, mechanical stability, the overall tunable connectivity and permeability, very low permeability that enables performance in hydrogen economy, advanced electronics, semicon, XEV, chemical processing, and more. So the combination is really key. Looking at alternatives, oftentimes when you need more than one property, the alternatives don't perform. You're potentially putting yourself at risk where failure is not an option. Think about a soldier in the field. Think about an airplane or an astronaut. We don't have the opportunity for for materials to perform almost as well, or for materials to perform in some conditions but not all, or potentially to not perform for as many years. If we have something, a vehicle or an aircraft or a soldier tool in the field that needs to perform for 1, 2, 10, 20 years, and we find that an alternative fails early, we're putting many people at risk. So as we look at the kinds of trade-offs in the selection of the materials, the high performance materials really are selected where they're required. You can see many of the high performance materials are the materials that Chemours products that are within our portfolio. Looking at PFA, FKM, Viton materials, PFPE, PFSA, FEP, PTFE, ETFE. These are selected materials due to specific properties, whether it's abrasion resistance or electrical insulation performance, or overall strength, durability, and flexibility. And there are a number of sectors that rely heavily on these, and they have to perform every day as well as they did the day before, really solving a lot of tough problems. Department of Defense actually published a report recently warning that losing access to these essential chemistries would compromise our national security. They use these materials in everything from guided missiles, aircraft, radar systems, PPE, and more. And we're hearing the same from Europe and other regions. The goal of green energy, the everyday reality of transportation that we already mentioned, safety, security, connectivity, rely on fluorochemistries and fluoropolymers to be able to do this job every day reliably and dependably. Responses to the European REACH dossier were over 5,000 in public comments. So we know that this really does impact everyone's everyday life. Here are some examples where our fluoropolymers, PTFE, FEP, PFA, or ETFE, for example, insulate wire to enable extremely fast and reliable data transfer. The materials are inherently non-flammable and durable at very high and low temperatures, or even in harsh chemical environments, which makes them perfectly suited for some of these specific applications. So whether you're thinking about designing a cable for a fighter jet, an Ethernet cable for a home or office building, data center cabling for the AI boom, or even cables for security, measurement, or monitoring, we're constantly working with customers and with different industries to understand what they need to be able to perform these tasks really well and dependably, and to ensure that they have the right materials for their designs. There are certainly a number of industries that are facing emerging challenges due to macro trends requiring faster data and more of it. The AI boom, of course, is something that everybody hears about and is very real. The amount of energy, the amount of data, the amount of power is significant, and it continues to grow. So this is an example of where we see a need for cabling, for materials, for the safety and the performance that fluoropolymers can bring. Here are some examples, everything from uniquely designed cables to layer by layer construction, connecting rack to rack, or connecting within servers and boards, and connecting chips. Even in cooling, we might have requirements for specific materials. And as you're pushing to extremely high frequencies, only certain materials can perform this well. Another example that we can touch on today is within advanced electronics, even outside of the electronics themselves and the servers and data centers. The semicon manufacturing facilities really require strong materials, durable materials, and pure materials. They have to be able to, the polymers that are used to be able to move the fluids across different parts of the semiconductor fabrication facilities need to be incredibly pure. They need to be resistant to permeability, and they need to be able to be molded and designed very specifically to be able to get very harsh chemistries, liquids and gases, where they need to be able to etch wafers, to be able to wash wafers, and to be able to get the chips at a very high yield from these facilities. They're incredibly complicated facilities. And if you've ever had a chance to see, there are multi-floors, there are many different areas, there's a lot of filtration, a lot of seals, gaskets, O-rings. So here's some examples of where Chemours materials really help to ensure that you've got the right material for the job, and that you can rely on it, that you can keep the employees safe, you can keep the yields high. Really, when you think about where these materials are used, all sectors in essence really rely on each other. So the chemical industry might be looking at reactive vessels or pipelining. Medical and pharma need to have materials, reactor vessels, tubing, even vials and seals for vaccination liquids to stay clean and have very high shelf life. Electronics and semicon, we touched on already around electrical performance, cleanliness, and durability in extreme conditions. Industrial machinery, automation, energy, whether it's a fuel cell or a battery, materials like fluoropolymers can help to enable a lot of advancements. And of course, transportation, whether it's heavy duty transportation, everyday automotive, train, aerospace, or more, even marine. It's incredible to think all of the harsh chemical environments and temperature extremes that you might see from a submarine to an automobile to a spaceship. Fluoropolymers in clean energy, as some examples, looking at making hydrogen, looking at using hydrogen, enabling the grid to be able to be transitioned to renewables, and then even thinking more around sustainability of the stationary and how to manage battery storage and electrical storage. These are all very important topics that the materials support any advancement and kind of consistency within these for durability and performance. Processing industry, think about vessels, valves, reactor vessels, heat tracing, seals, gaskets, pumps, diaphragms, even ion exchange membranes or different kinds of wiring, monitoring, measuring devices that are more and more important, especially as industry is getting smarter and as regulations are getting tighter, more and more measurement and monitoring is required. Thinking about medical, this is an example. When I walk through the labs and I see medical devices, it reminds me to stay healthy, keep running, and stay in shape, because I don't want to have to rely on some of these things for my everyday life. But it's good to know that the materials are there and the performance is going to be reliable. Medical devices rely on fluoropolymers for things like coefficient of friction, durability, inertness, the ability to have very, very thin tubing, very, very thin wire coatings. Less invasive surgeries really wouldn't be possible with and drug delivery and things like catheter guide wires. These are made possible by these materials and really would not be able to be an option for you today or tomorrow or for your loved ones if we didn't have these materials with these properties. Medical imaging is another thing that we don't think a lot about, but the amount of information we can gather now from MRIs and CAT scans and ultrasounds, it's amazing, a high amount of data that we can get very quickly from these machines. So to continue to use the materials that we need, rely on the materials, and to produce them safely, it's very important for us to ensure that we have regulations in place that can allow the production, the use, and the continued reliance upon these materials. Each country is managing this differently. And really the overarching challenge is the science and society, right? The data, the science, the risk assessment, the management of this overlaying with the society's perception. What are the essential uses? Can we educate the communities on where they use and rely on these materials every day? Can they trust the manufacturers that are in their community to be able to do this the right way? Whether you're making the material or whether you're bringing the material in to use at your facility, emissions are important. The type of chemistry, the amount of energy you use is important. And we can see that a lot of the materials that we use, a lot of the solutions that we're providing with these materials are really strong contributors to the UN SDGs. But the way we make the materials is also important. So the world's really asking for solutions to these challenging problems. Critical materials with reliable quality, performance attributes that they rely on, that they need, and that they need to be able to trust. And increased regulation for the manufacturing and use really is important. Chemours certainly does believe that, and also believes that it really should be science-based. The amount of time it takes for a product to get to market, the amount of time it takes for a permit to be put in place, the consistency and the clarity of the regulations and the cohesiveness, so that we don't have confusion at the state level or federal level, for example. That's really going to be what helps us to move forward. There are really a lot of different molecular structures that are included in something like a broad restriction. I think it's more important and more relevant to be able to break that down into more tangible pieces. So I thought it might be helpful today to talk a little bit more about some of the broad regulations that are being proposed and the ability for manufacturers to adhere to them by better understanding them. So if we look at PFAS, for example, it's an acronym that's really quite broad in its applicability. Anything, depending on the organization, the definition can be incredibly broad to any fully fluorinated carbon or a fully fluorinated carbon that's attached to certain other end groups, side groups, or other chains. But I wanted to share a little bit more about the differences between some of the things that are in these categories or that might fall out of the categories. The per and polyfluorosubstances is kind of the main group. If we break that down into two categories, we can look at the non-polymers, the smaller molecule. We can also look at the polymers, so the larger molecules where you're building larger building blocks together to make large polymers. These currently really fall within a lot of the same kinds of regulations. And I think what's important is to be able to break these out into specific categories. So Chemours and many others are really advocating for the different polymers and non-polymers, or for different types of end groups, side groups, or even chain modifications to be managed differently, because the materials do perform differently, and they may act differently in the environment as well. So looking at some science-based regulations to differentiate is going to be a big benefit. Something to think about is fluoropolymers specifically fall within this broader definition, but so would like solids, liquids, and gases. But each would have very different properties and performance, from stability, size, and mobility. A very large molecular weight, a very large polymer. Think of it as a ball of yarn. This actually could be a string of carbon-fluorine bonds that are about 1 million molecular units long. Or it could be a very small, more mobile individual compound that's a smaller molecule. So it's important to differentiate. It's important to think through what they are and not try to treat them the same way. For example, if you looked at hydrocarbons being managed the same way, you could say that a milk jug, a plastic container, kerosene or gasoline, a cocktail, olive oil, could all be potentially thrown together into one regulation. I think that doesn't make sense. I don't think anybody would say we can easily describe one regulation to manage that many different hydrocarbons. I think it's the same with fluorinated materials. As we look at a PFAS ban, as we look at broad bans, we need to be more specific about what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to bring in terms of safety, reliability, and sustainability and responsible manufacturing. Fluoropolymers are very durable, very robust. We could look at pieces of data cable, right? And we could look at tubing, and we understand that these aren't going to pose a health risk. obviously are contributing a lot to safety and to sustainability, whether it's green energy or whether it's within transportation and safety and even national defense. Polymers are not bioavailable, they're not toxic, and they're not mobile. They're very large, bulky molecules. They don't do much, and they're very inert. So what their job really is to hold still, to do their job, and to be able to resist reactions with anything around it, which would be very different than maybe a small molecule or something different. Fluoropolymers can't dissolve in water. In fact, one of the unique attributes of the fluoropolymers is that they're very difficult to dissolve in much of anything. So you'll see most of the materials are melted to reform into a cable coating or to reform into a tube, because there really isn't much you can do in terms of dissolving in water to be able to have the materials be reformed in that way. They also don't degrade into PFAS or create a lot of small molecules as they're being used. So there are certainly some misconceptions in the field right now. So it's important to be educated and to start thinking about how to be more specific in terms of the kinds of regulations that are put in place. The regulatory environment is very complicated, so I'm not going to trivialize that at all. Right now, when we look at PFAS as a class, it's being managed differently. The conversations are progressing differently all around the world. There are some group-based approach. Europe is trying to look at PFAS as a group, as one large group. They're starting now, after their 5,000 public comments, to break things out into more specific use cases and more specific types of materials and molecules. Canada and Great Britain have been looking at fluoropolymers as a separate class and are walking through some of the conversations now with that differentiation. The US is a little bit complicated. It's a very mixed approach, sort of fragmented, with the federal and state guidelines being different. There is a bit of confusion and a lack of clarity there. I think that needs to be addressed, but maybe that's for a different day. Emerging regulation, there are some, as other countries and regions move forward, some of them are selecting to follow some of the frameworks that are being proposed by the other regions. There are Stockholm Convention, there are other kinds of methodologies that are already in place that are also being considered and adopted and moving forward. So globally, it is not an easy answer. And it's difficult. And I know many of the customers that we serve and Chemours itself are global companies. So we have to think through every product, every material, every application, every emission profile or permit. We have to think through each individually, where it is, what it's being used for, and how best to manage it holistically. Just kind of giving you a sense of how some of this is distributed across the globe right now. The matrixed approach, the emerging regulations, the focused approach, it's really different all over the globe. As we think through overall, regulations and proposals and commitments to sustainability, Chemours is committed to be more sustainable company, to reduce emissions, to be able to think through how to make products, processes, and production facilities more sustainable. We're focusing on reducing energy consumption. We're focusing on reducing emissions, reducing fluorinated organic emissions specifically. So to do this, to achieve these things, and to really do something about it that's real, not just a conversation, Chemours has invested a lot of time and money and effort into advancing some important technologies. State-of-the-art techniques such as analyzing targeted and non-targeted analytes, which might be the impurities that are in materials or in other samples, even environmental samples, pushing detection levels lower and lower, being able to develop methodologies, figuring out how to, even if you can't dissolve a fluoropolymer in water, can you do some hard work to extract impurities or to be able to detect and quantify impurities that might be in emission profiles so that we can see what's there and then be able to manage that going forward. We have a lot of work. We've worked with quite a few different agencies and companies to be able to develop brand new state-of-the-art emission controls for air and water. We're looking at incineration and seeing what kind of information is known and which information still needs to be figured out in terms of how to adequately incinerate. Raw material replacements are important. There are solvents that are being removed from some methodologies. For example, replacing, trying to replace NMP in battery production. You can switch to a PTFE dry process to be able to avoid using NMP in the production of EV batteries. So there are some great advancements already being made and put in place to be able to reduce some of the solvents and surfactants and additives that are used. Fluoropolymers don't rely on additives and plasticizers, which is really one less thing to worry about in terms of extractabilities. We do use some surfactants in the production, some fluorinated, some non-fluorinated, depending on the types of materials and how strong and how big and how robust that molecular structure needs to be built. So we can talk a little bit more about that too. There are a lot of sustainability programs focusing on circularity, which is great. Reduce and reuse and recycle is a great way to think about how to move forward. We have Nafion membranes that can be recycled. We have PFA and FEP that have been recycled for many, many years. So if you see in your value chain that there's incineration, that there's landfilling, have that conversation. Call us, let us know how we can help. We can refer you to some experts in the field as well. Data cables, piping, tubing, even some wearables, can be recycled, or you can start to incorporate recycled content into new designs. So there's a lot of great work we can do with that. Fluoropolymers, because they are so robust, are pretty easily recyclable. So as a lot of companies are developing sustainability goals and having conversations about 2030, 2050, being carbon neutral or trying to reduce emissions, Chemours has taken this commitment pretty early on and pretty seriously. We've looked at our portfolio, the kinds of products that we offer, and we're trying to ensure that the products that we are going to continue to make and move forward with contribute to the UN SDG in a positive manner. We're looking at our overall supply chain and the sustainability of that, thinking through how we can improve overall energy consumption and those sorts of things as well. We're looking through really looking at the people that make up Chemours, ensuring that we've got safety and that we've got community outreach and support to the communities, both in terms of STEM and in terms of the environment and other programs. We're even looking at the employees and the team members that we have here, ensuring that we've got folks that are a nice diverse population that's really bringing their whole self to work. So this is a kind of a broad scope of sustainability. We'll talk a little bit more today about our short shared planet goal, really looking at climate, water, and waste, reducing landfill, ensuring that we reduce air and water emissions by 99% or more, and then thinking through greenhouse gas and other operations and energy consumption. We've already made a lot of progress. 2018 was really one of the years that we spent figuring out how much do we spend in terms of energy or unit to be able to produce material at our facilities globally. They're complicated processes, but as we look through feedstocks and production and shipping and getting customers their products, there's a lot to consider in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and in terms of our overall, what we can impact and what we can control within our scope. So Chemours really has been looking at reducing process emissions dramatically and also reducing energy consumption. So incorporating renewable energy, incorporating new ways to do things, looking through adopting new technologies and new techniques to be able to reduce our footprint of our facilities, really having really good positive improvements in our product carbon footprint, and ensuring that we're going to continue our journey to net zero. It's important to define responsible manufacturing and sustainability holistically. So Chemours really does look at a broad scope. We talked a little bit about contributing to the UN SDGs. We also talked kind of more at the end game of getting the products through manufacturing into the customer's hands safely and with low, with the the best benefit we can in terms of responsible manufacturing and sustainability. So as we look at this definition, we want to be the most comprehensible in the industry, and most comprehensive, and to encompass everything from the invention of the products, their use, and with our customers, and in different applications and industries, and then overall in the end of life as well. So for this, we'll talk more about ensuring that we can look at the creation and the markets that we serve, ensuring that we have a positive impact. The fluoropolymer manufacturing process can be somewhat complicated, and it's not the same by every manufacturer or even by every grade of product. We have elastomeric materials, we have plastic materials, we have lubricants and greases. So if we look at an example, just kind of a high-level example, raw materials go in, we have monomers, we have specific kinds of surfactants in some cases to be able to ensure that we have a thorough mixing to be able to build these building blocks and into polymers. We have the polymerization reaction, and that of course is optimized by temperature, by mixing, agitation, etc., to be able to ensure that we can create the best quality polymers with the most consistency. And then the polymer is finished. So think about going from a liquid reaction where everything it starts to become the building blocks for polymers, separating those out, isolating them, and then preparing them to be able to be used in their final form. That would be called polymer finishing. Then we have a dry polymer that goes to market in most situations. So that could be a powder, it could be a pellet, it could be a film. And so it can look like a simplified process, right? Product in, reaction, product out. When it really comes to looking at a holistic sustainability approach, it's a lot more complicated than that. So when we have raw materials, whether we're shipping them to our sites or whether we're charging them into vessels, we want to look at the air abatement or potential emissions at each step along this process. So maybe there are solid waste, maybe there are byproducts that we filter out. There are facilities that we need to ensure that we have our raw materials and our monomers being fed in and managed correctly so that we have tight systems and we don't have additional leakage. When we're looking at the overall polymerization reaction, we've got a lot of different formulations, surfactants, potentially comonomers, and other materials that are fed in to be able to create unique molecular weights, unique flexibility, unique temperature, durability attributes. So we build polymers very specifically to be able to ensure that we have a portfolio that covers our customers' needs. We also then, when we're looking at finishing, we would again be looking at solid waste, any emissions to air or water that need to be abated. And through this, we have identified and really quantified and characterized a lot of emission profile information to be able to impact that. And then, of course, we touched on earlier, recycle and recover. We don't want to have byproducts even going to landfills if there's a way for us to recycle or recover them. And in reality, too, many of these raw materials are expensive, so we don't want to have them go out in an air or water emission. We want to be able to recycle and recover even the polymerization aids, surfactants, or raw materials, or comonomers to be able to bring those back and use them in final production. Here are a couple of examples of state-of-the-art emission controls that Chemours has put in place already, but it shows a little bit more about the size and the investment that we have done. So this is Denise Dignam, our CEO. She's been visiting each of our sites as they have built and constructed and designed really unique ways to capture emissions and to incorporate clean energy and to be able to make advancements within our production facilities to improve our sustainability and overall responsible manufacturing efforts. So this is a picture of her at the Dordrecht facility as we're getting a new process commissioned there. We have a thermal oxidizer in Fayetteville, North Carolina. That's amazing. It's huge, and it was very expensive, but it does a great job of being able to capture and degrade some of the small level impurities that might come off of our process. Carbon beds and other things have been deployed to ensure that we can capture the tiniest amount. We're thinking, part per million, part per billion, or sometimes even smaller in different streams that we're trying to pull out, which can be complicated and is not an easy off-the-shelf solution. So here's an example. There's even a barrier wall that was built in the Cape Fear region of Fayetteville, where we've got over $100 million invested to be able to capture and treat. And the result of this was over 99% of fluorinated organic compounds that were removed, captured, and able to be treated to prevent them from going into the water. This is an example in Washington Works, West Virginia, where we have some abatement processes that were put in place. This is a unique solution where we've designed a process that actually resulted in increased yields of first quality material, and also ensured that we didn't have a significant amount of waste coming out from our processes. We reduced more than 100 metric tons of waste in 2023. So about $750,000 spent on state-of-the-art process control technology to be able to improve the processes, to be able to run them better, and to be able to ensure that we had less emissions, less second quality material that needed to be managed, and less waste. Touched on earlier around air abatement in our Dordrecht Works facility in the Netherlands, where we had $75 million invested in abatement technologies. These have been very impressive because they're complicated streams. They're very, very dilute, which might seem like a simpler problem, but it's actually quite difficult because the amount of flow is huge. And so as we're reducing fluorinated organic compounds and greenhouse gases, we see here we reduced the emission of HFPO dimer acid, one of the ingredients, and its salts to air emissions reduced more than 99%. So really great work that the teams have done, working with vendors, working with different engineers and technology teams to be able to put in place abatement technologies. So the other challenge that we see is even being able to see what's there, measure it, and measure our improvement. To be able to hit these really aggressive fluorinated organic compound reduction targets around the world, we've had to identify and really develop and build a lot of measurement technologies. We actually have some team members who are going to some conferences. You might see them at fluorochemistry conferences and in different kinds of PFAS conferences, talking a little bit about the advancements that Chemours has put in place to be able to even see, quantify, identify the kinds of impurities that might be present in any kind of sample, whether it's a product sample or whether it's in an emission sample or something like that, where we have looked at targeted and non-targeted analysis. And we've looked at how to tackle this at very different product levels, impurity levels. So we've gone from, if we look at our history, we've gone from LCMS techniques to adding triple quad and much more advanced equipment. We've gone from looking at a few analytes at a time, even looking at if you've seen reference to targeted lists. Those targeted lists could be 10, 20, 40, maybe 50, 70 analytes. That list grows as we see more and learn more about what is potentially in a process technology as a byproduct that could be formed. We actually have a publication we put out recently that shows really good examples of those building blocks. Where do the impurities, how can they be formed, and how can they be built? And that helps us to be able to narrow them down, to identify them, and to be able to abate them. But we're going to many, many, many more analytes in terms of what we can see with our methodologies and quantify. The levels of detection have gone from percent level to ppm. Now we're at ppt and potentially lower. So really significant improvements in terms of detection limits as well. And then the time, going from days, weeks, months to be able to do this work down to seconds. It's really impressive to see how the advancements have moved forward in terms of the analytical side. Here's an example of some of the polymerization aid surfactant conversations that we've been having with some of our customers that I can touch on briefly. And we've got some, again, some publications and presentations that can dig into this a little deeper if you're interested. But here's an example of where we look at some PTFE and some PVDF samples just from the market. This first bar here shows a Chemours PTFE normal powder that we would sell to a customer to make into maybe a wire insulation or tubing or a device. The known impurities here, you can see red is targeted. This would be the current list of impurities that labs, maybe a third-party lab or others are looking for. A non-targeted would be compounds that are not on that list, compounds that might exist by some of the new technologies. Like, for example, non-fluorinated surfactants are being proposed. They're really not a one-size-fits-all solution. We use non-fluorinated surfactants, and we actually have some processes that don't use surfactants at all. But as we've looked at some companies taking a fluorinated surfactant technology, converting it to a non-fluorinated surfactant, you start to develop new impurities, new chemistries, new building blocks are being formed, especially with a non-fluorinated surfactant, for example. That hydrocarbon chemistry, the carbon-hydrogen bonds, are a lot more easily attacked. So when you start to look at the reactivity of what's in your mixture, you can start to build a lot of new chemistries and impurities that you didn't have before, and that certainly aren't part of your targeted list. So if you're submitting a sample to a third-party lab saying, analyze the normal 20, 30, 40 analytes that you always look at, they're going to say, okay, it looks good. I don't see anything. Your material looks clean. But in reality, when you start thinking about your emission profile, when you start thinking about what you're going to do with this material and how it will play its role in its progression throughout its life, and what it needs to do to achieve performance in different industries and areas, that material might actually have a lot of other impurities that you're unaware of. Here are some PVDF samples we got from the open market, just ordered from chemical catalogs and things. We saw many of them actually had quite a lot of non-targeted impurities. One actually had quite a lot of targeted impurities, and so it shows that you probably should also look at your supply chain, because there are still some manufacturers using PFOA and using some of the older surfactant technologies that should have been transitioned away from many years ago. So keep that in mind as well as you look through your supply chain, because we're looking at maybe 1,000 to 10,000 parts per billion, so part per million levels of residuals in some of these materials that we saw that were using NFS and had kind of claimed to have solved that problem. So really important as you look through your responsible manufacturing going forward as well. Just in closing, I wanted to think through, there are different kinds of polymerization aids. There are different kinds of factors to consider in terms of building a strong product that will perform as well and be as durable. So we look through technical feasibility of a lot of different kinds of advancements to make to become more sustainable in even producing our current products and our next generation products that we're researching right now. So one example is, our Viton Forward APA material. We're producing this with non-fluorinated surfactants. This is the last product line that needed to be transitioned to a non-fluorinated surfactant, and we were able to successfully do that. We're actually getting that to market right now, and it's going through evaluations. It's performing really well with our customers. So think through, the progression. It doesn't happen overnight, but it absolutely can happen when you're committed to doing it. So Viton's an example of where we've already transitioned away from fluorinated surfactants because we found things that do that job really, really well. As we look at some of our other materials, PFA and FEP and PTFE, there are some grades that still rely on a fluorinated surfactant, and to be able to build that polymer and to be able to ensure that the residual profile and your targeted, non-targeted analytes are incredibly low in terms of impurities, that research is not yet done. So we're still working on some of these things, but we're committing to being able to bring really good materials to market, so that the customers that we serve and the markets that we serve, and for all of you, that you've got the right material for the job. Fluoropolymers really are safe and necessary for societal advancement, for today's technology, and for many other technologies that are coming to us from the future, as we're preparing for new performance, for new data, for new technologies to be able to take hold. So it's important to really think through how regulations need to be designed to be able to look at a fluoropolymer potentially differently than a fluorochemical, or a specific small chains and long chains, and how to do those in the right way. Looking at science-based and really robust, rigorous standards for chemical manufacturing, ensuring that that each region, all manufacturers, really think through how to to manufacture in a cleaner way and a more responsible way, so that it's not just one or two companies that are carrying this load. So I think that's kind of where how I'd like to close today, thinking through really ensuring that you have a holistic approach to sustainability, looking at your manufacturing, where products are being used, and overall how you're managing the entire supply chain. So I'll turn it over back to Michelle to close for us today. And see if there are any questions.
Hi, Michelle, or hi, Bianca.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the slide up, but give me
No
1
problem.
second and I will
Sure.
be able to announce your questions.
Mhm.
Bianca, we had a question submitted that is, why does the U.S. have a mixed approach?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I've got a perfect answer for that one, but they certainly do have a mixed approach, and it is creating a lot of confusion. I think the state and federal guidelines, requirements, and definitions even are quite different. If you look from one state to the next, the definition of what is a PFAS could differ. I don't have a good answer of why it's being managed in this way. I do have a good sense of the confusion that it's causing. So I'm not sure I have a really good answer to that question.
Aw, thank you. What approaches might be taken by manufacturers, suppliers, and users to intercept end-of-life or post-use products before they enter the waste stream or the environment? What are the prospects for reuse, recycling, reprocessing?
Yeah, I would point to some of the companies already. If you look online, or I can certainly follow up with you afterwards. Or you could look through. We had Fluoropolymer Resources and some others, other companies participate in some of our sustainability panel sessions in our previous IWCS conferences, where we talked through some of the technologies that are being proposed, some of the technologies already in place. I would look to start thinking about what are the products or even byproducts that you might be able to recycle or reduce. Optimizing your process is a great way to save energy, to reduce waste, and to increase your yields. But when you do have maybe some edge trim, scrap, or second quality material, I would recommend partnering with somebody like a Fluoropolymer Resources or like others in the industry who are working through really unique solutions on how to recycle the material and ensure that it doesn't go into a landfill.
Thank you. Are NRTLs like UL looking at certifying reprocessed fluoropolymers?
Yes, I believe so. I know that actually within our IWCS team, we have some folks from UL that are participating as members. There is a certain percentage of reprocessed or recycled content that can go into wire and cable applications today, I believe. So it's up to the end, I guess the end user, the producer of the wire and cable design, to ensure that their product as designed meets specific criteria. Like, so for example, a flame test or something like that, looking at smoke or looking at drip or some of the specific attributes to that product. So I believe there are some percentage that can be incorporated now. Really, I think I would expect that to be dialogue going forward. Can we have a fully recycled material going forward? I believe it's feasible. I'd like to see more work being done in there. I'm seeing some pockets of success already. So yeah, I think there's already some active work there, and I assume it's progressing through. I don't know that I've got like today's update on exactly where UL and other NRTLs are with this process, though.
Thank you. Do the same concerns with PTFE apply to FKM when moving away from fluorinated surfactant and using hydrocarbon-based surfactant instead?
Sure. Anytime you look at changing a process technology, a process chemistry, you need to be really, you need to research it quite well to ensure that your new technology is producing a really strong and robust, reliable, durable material for the applications that it needs to serve, that it can be molded well, formed at the appropriate temperatures, those kinds of things, and can be a good replacement to be able to be used. So from the performance attributes, it's key to look at all of these different factors. From the surfactant side of things, when you're producing that material, yeah, you could potentially be inadvertently producing other impurities, and that's what's really important. And what Chemours has spent a lot of time doing is looking at the content, looking at being able to produce the best materials with very low residual profiles, and very low impurities and byproducts, both for yield and for sustainability. So it would apply really to take that mindset and that thorough evaluation through any polymer production.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Bianca, for presenting this very interesting and relevant topic today. Please note the contact points being shown. Should you wish to contact Bianca after today's event, or if you have any further questions. Each of these IWCS webinar series presentation events are recorded and will be archived on the IWCS.org web. It only takes up to 1 week to post. The webinar series will contain technical paper presentation webinars and sponsored company events several times a month. Our next scheduled technical paper presentation webinar event will be on Friday, July 18th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern USA time. Each of you will be receiving an announcement for these events. Please feel free to share our announcements with your colleagues so they can join in and register as well. In addition to our webinar series, we are excited to announce 4 special sessions on important industry trends taking place during our IWCS 2025 Cable and Connectivity Industry Forum at the end of October in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, USA. In addition to focused presentations and panels on topics such as AI, machine learning for communication network infrastructure, smart connectivity, resilience and innovation of future smart grids and cables for electric vehicle applications, today's topic by Bianca will be expanded upon in our session on sustainable solutions for power and data cables. This session will continue to build on the compelling conversations and industry initiatives in similar sessions during the 2023 and 4 IWCS conferences. It is important that we recognize all our IWCS partners, sponsors, and thank them, including Chemours, who contribute greatly to the success of our Cable and Connectivity Industry Forum. Without their strong leadership and generosity, we would not be able to bring these important technical innovations and information to you and our global community. Again, thank you to those leading suppliers in our industry for your support. Lastly, for over 73 years, the IWCS Cable and Connectivity Industry Forum has been the recognized leader showcasing new technologies in cable and connectivity products, processes, and applications. Our next Cable and Connectivity Industry Forum will be the 74th annual and will take place Monday through Thursday, October 27th through 30th at the David L. Lawrence Convention Center, DLCC, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, USA. Please look out in your inbox, social media, and our website to learn more as the exciting information becomes available. Visit our website at any time, IWCS.org, for more event details. Thank you for participating, and this concludes today's webinar.